So today I want to just give you a quick hit, a short little video here about, I don't want to say infamous, that's not the right word, but an iconic, that's the right word, an iconic battle from the Civil War. It's not just an iconic battle from the Civil War, it's an iconic battle in military history in general. And it's because it is the first battle ever between naval warships that were made not of wood, but of iron. And so the title I have here is an ironclad revolution. Ironclad is a term that refers to the types of warships that were eventually used throughout the Civil War. And it all started with this first battle. They started to build naval warships that were clad in iron armor instead of using wooden ships. And the first two ships that ever, of this kind, that ever fought each other on March 9th, 1862 at what becomes known as the Battle of Hampton Roads. Now, this is connected to the Peninsula Campaign, part of the Union attack on Richmond that was led by General McClellan in 1862. The Peninsula Campaign happened to be this naval battle at a place called Hampton Roads. So I'm going to tell you a quick little story about the ships and a little bit about the battle, and then there's a short little video that I want you to watch, a YouTube video that documents the battle and gives a little bit more detail. So let's start with the two ships themselves. The Union ship that is going to fight at the Battle of Hampton Roads is known as the USS Monitor. It's actually the first ironclad warship that was ever built. It's going to square off in the Battle of Hampton Roads against a Confederate ship called the CSS Virginia. Now, I'm going to tell you a story about each of these, and I'll show you some pictures of what they look like. While this battle is fascinating, that it's the first time ever that ironclad warships fight each other, just the story behind the ships themselves are pretty fascinating as well. So let's talk about the Monitor first. In fact, I'm going to show you, I'll come back to that side in a second. Let me show you a picture here. The USS Monitor was a ship that was designed by a military naval architect, and it was one of several that was submitted to the Union Army by different designers. And this was the one that they chose to go with, and they paid to have this ship made. So this ship looked unlike any other warship that had ever existed. I don't know if you can tell here, but what was unique about it is that it only stuck out of the water a few feet, and it had this long, flat deck, like a platform. And then in the middle of that was a round turret. That round turret is where the guns were. The guns stuck out of this metal turret. One of the things that made this ship so revolutionary, besides the fact that it was covered in armor, was the fact that this turret on the top of the ship could turn 360 degrees. It could spin all the way around, and that way aim its guns at its enemy in any direction. This is a revolution in and of itself, because prior to this, warships, if you think about old wooden warships, they had their guns sticking out of the sides of the ship, which meant that the ship had to turn its broadside to face its enemy. Well, that didn't have to happen with this ship. This ship could navigate through waters and turn the guns in the direction it needed to fire instead of the entire ship. So you put all this stuff together, and this was a very unique, revolutionary design. The other ship, if we go back to this slide, the CSS Virginia, I'll show you a picture of that in a second, was quite a bit different. And number one, it was way larger, it was huge. Besides it being covered in iron like the Monitor, its shape was different, the design was different, and part of that is because of where it came from and what they built it out of. So let me tell you the story about the CSS Virginia. So there's the CSS Virginia right there. So prior to this battle taking place, early in the secession movement, before the war, actually I guess as the war was starting, the Union eventually, we know, is pushed out and or flees different forts and naval bases in Southern Territory. Well, as the Union soldiers and sailors were leaving Norfolk, Virginia, which was a naval base in Norfolk, Virginia, as they were leaving and heading back north as the war was starting, they knew that they couldn't leave these big warships in these naval bases in the South for the Confederate Army to take over. And so one of them was called the USS Merrimack. The Merrimack was a big wooden warship that was in Norfolk's harbor in the naval base there. And so before the Union soldiers fled Norfolk, they decided to sink this big wooden warship, the Merrimack. So they scuttle it and they sink it to the bottom of the harbor there, and then they flee, and the Confederates eventually took over that naval base. When the Confederates did that, they raised the wooden hull of this old Merrimack ship, this old wooden warship, and that was what they used to build their first ironclad. If you see on this picture, the hull of this ship, and it's hard to tell probably on this image, but it's made of wood, and it's huge. It's just the old wooden hull of an old wooden warship. What they did was they stripped the top and decided to cover the top of the ship with this iron plating, this iron armor. The ship had this sort of like teepee shaped, sort of triangular top. It had guns sticking out of the sides like a traditional warship, so this did have to turn. It didn't have a turret like the Union ship. They put this massive battering ram made out of big oak beams on the front of it so that it could ram into old wooden ships if it fought against them. Remember, this was, at the time, one of only 2 ironclad warships. All right, so these 2 ships are built, one by the Union, one by the Confederates, and the Battle of Hampton Roads is where they make their debut. The battle is a big naval battle. There's multiple ships, both Union and Confederate ships involved, of the old traditional wooden style warships. But then the Monitor and the Virginia sail into this harbor at Hampton Roads, and they start fighting against one another. Now, I put down here at the bottom, who won, question mark, because I'm going to leave the answer to that question for the video that you're going to watch after this. So a little, I guess I'm going to call this the strange and fascinating fact for the day, just the first battle ever in human history between ironclad warships. So you'll watch a short little video, it'll show you what they look like, it'll talk about the specifics of the battle, and you'll find out who wins the battle of the first ironclad warships. Good luck.